Adding music. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I picked two tracks that I really liked. One was called New City and one was called Boundary. If you look at Boundary, I really like that the length is almost perfect, so I don't even hardly have to mess with that. Let me tell you, from an excess of experience right off the bat, -10, -10. If you did the volume in the same process that I did it, where you did your EQing, you did your compression, you ended up at a place with your limiter at about -3 decibels with those peaks just pressed down. If you put your music at -10 decibels, you're gonna be in the ballpark of the volume it needs to be in the final product right away.
I knew that abundant thinkers, prosperous people, successful people were doing something that I wasn't doing, because my life was evidence. Your life is an evidence of what you're...
See, and that's a little on the loud side, but it's in the ballpark. Let's go ahead and listen to this one. -10 decibels, and...
I was willing to do what I'd never done before. I was willing to say what I'd never said before. But first I had to learn what I didn't even know. I knew that abundant thinkers, prosperous people, successful people, started following successful people. And I want to know, what did they do in the morning? What did they do at night? What did they do when they failed? And I like those behind the black curtain questions.
So as you can see, if you put it at -10 decibels, this one's a little on the loud side, this one's a little on the quiet side, but both of them are in the ballpark where we need to be. Now, here's the biggest problem you're going to have with audio, is this part is really quiet. This part is really loud. Because really at this point, we need the audio to sit under the vocal and just kind of get out of the way and just kind of accompany it and not be too prominent and not be too quiet. So when you have a dynamic sounding music where it has loud parts that are real loud like over here and then real quiet like over here, then no matter how many times you set your audio level, there's going to be parts where the music's going to be too loud or it's going to be too quiet. If it sounded perfect right here, it's going to sound way too loud over here. If it sounds perfect right here, it's going to sound way too quiet over here. Again, let's go back to compression, and we're really going to compress the living shit out of this thing, because it needs to sit under that vocal very nicely, very comfortably. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to pull up a compressor again, and we are going to set the ratio to 5. And we are going to compress the Yankee Doodle out of this bad boy. And I'm looking at my after. Now look at that. Look at how my quietest parts are in comparison to my loudest parts. They're almost equal. I could probably throw it down another couple decibels. Boom. This is before. I'm going to go ahead and apply it after. I know I told you not to apply effects, but I know what direction I'm doing with this. I've done this so many times. I know what I'm expecting, so I am okay with that. So let's go ahead and dial that in.
Because my life was evidence. Your life is an evidence of what you're up to. You relearn. Sometimes you have to is believing in the unseen anyway. So I had enough faith to go, I don't necessarily have to see it yet. I don't necessarily have to see it yet.
Okay, this next step you're probably not going to be able to hear unless you have some good speakers, unless you're listening to a nice stereo system, but I'm going to go ahead and add a little stereo width to this track, because I think I want my vocal to kind of like be down the center, and then I want my music to sound kind of off to the sides. And when I have that spread out like that, I have a little more space between my vocal and my music. I can bring the music up a little bit more, and it's a little more ambient, it's a little more off to the sides. It's just a cooler vibe. So I might even take this guy here and I might say Spatial Waves S1 Imager, and see, you can really see right here, that's your width right there, how much you're spreading it out. So this one, I might say I want to narrow it out a little bit. So if I have it at default, narrow it down.
I was willing to do what I'd never done before.
And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it wider. Same plugin. S1 Imager, and there is a preset built into Waves. Dave Pensato, Pensato's Place. He has a plugin called Pensato 3D Width. He is a Grammy award-winning mix musician, and he has his preset on here, and it sounds really good. Plug it in and go, and let's see how this sounds now. Like I said, you guys, if you're not listening on some studio equipment speakers, you might not hear the difference, but let's check it out.
I was willing to do what I'd never done before. I was willing to say what I'd never said before. People often want to call me the exception, like, oh my God, you're the exception.
So what I'm going to notice right here is that certain instruments start coming in here, that it's just the design of the instrument is going to kind of take up some of the frequencies that the vocal are trying to claim. So really it doesn't matter if you turn it down a bunch. It doesn't matter if you compress it. It doesn't matter if you adjust the volume. The problem is in the frequency, because if we have a lot of bassy instruments right here,
In order to plant a new seed to grow a new fruit. Like, that's what I came for, to disrupt your soil.
then the vocal's going to be able to push through just fine. Now we could take this part right here that has a lot of higher end strings and higher frequencies, and we could turn it down to where it's like awkwardly turned down, where you can tell the volume difference, where you sloped it down massively, but it's still going to sound kind of in the way of the vocal because it's a lot of high frequency instruments, and we know that our vocal's hitting in the high end of the frequency. So what's the obvious solution? Pull up an EQ, and we know that our sweet vocal range is sitting in this area. We know that our clarity in our vocal is sitting right around here. So what we can do is on this instrumental, we're just going to push this part down, make this nice and wide so it's really covering that area. And then we could even take our low end and push it up a little bit so we get some more prominency in our lower frequencies. That way the music sounds louder, but it's still staying out of the way of the vocal. Let's see how that sounds. Let's make the adjustment while it's playing.
That doesn't fit your future anymore. I was hungry. People often want to call me the exception, like, oh my God, you're the exception. No, I'm not the exception. I'm an average, ordinary woman who chose every day to make one more extraordinary decision. I'm an average, ordinary mom who said, I want to drastically transform my son's future. That he deserves to have every option that every other child would have, irregardless of what he was born into. I just was crazy enough to believe that. That it doesn't matter the color of my skin, doesn't matter my religious background, doesn't matter my origin, it doesn't matter my mom's bank account and my dad's bank account when I was born. None of that means my future. That's just the circumstance that I came from. That's not what defines my future.
Do you see what I'm saying there? We're taking the frequencies that are getting in the way of the vocal, we're pulling those down, but we're pushing up the frequencies that don't get in the way of the vocal. And then you have the music sounding really loud, but it's also the vocal still punching through nice and clean like. I think we're getting close to done here with this.
I knew that abundant thinkers, prosperous people, how do you get out of a mindset that says, I'm only going to have this much success because I'm a woman? Not to necessarily keep you comfortable in what you know, stay comfortable in that. That it doesn't matter the color of my skin, doesn't matter my religious background, doesn't matter my origin. I don't necessarily have to see it yet.
All right, that sounds freaking awesome. That is good to go. And if I only had one audio track, we would be finished here. I am, however, going to go ahead and go into this other audio track and see how I'm feeling on this one.